And now, please welcome Mr. D.B. Sweeney. You can do better than that. Keep it going.
Hello, how you doing?
Really good. So good to have you here. Oh, why don't you bring another chair up? This one just took a tumble.
Okay, there's all kinds of mouse traps here. I got the broken chair. You guys are looking for me to take a pratfall. I can see it.
Speaking of pratfalls, it looks like a lot of fun, almost slapstick, in the new short film, Too Dumb Mixed with Sean Astin. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, you know, Sean Astin, who is obviously also here today and tomorrow, I think, is an old friend of mine. We did Memphis Belle together in 1990, and we spent a great 5 months together in England and became great friends. And, you know, I was kind of new to Hollywood. He'd been in it for a while, and I thought, you know, when you make friends with somebody, you end up making 5, 6, 7 movies together and see each other all the time. And we never ended up working together again, so I really wanted to work with him. So I wrote this piece, and we did it about 2 years ago, and it was just kind of for fun. And so I submitted it to some film festivals to see if people thought it was funny, and we've ended up, it's won over 80 awards and prizes now in a year and a half. So it's been really fun. And Sean and I are planning on doing more installments of this. You saw about the first 2 minutes of it, and there's another 3 minutes it gets even stupider. So I think you guys, you know, you might like it. If you go to twodumbmix.com, and there's no B in the dumb because they're dumb. So, but hopefully we'll have more of those soon. We'll talk to Sean about it today.
Yeah. What was the inspiration for that? Like old like serials, you know, movie serials like they used to show?
Yeah, I love, you know, comedy's hard these days because obviously there's so much political correctness and there's comedy police if you say the wrong thing. So I started thinking the only thing people can't really get mad at you for is slapstick. I love Abbott and Costello, and I thought, you know, pie in the face is universal. So I really wanted to do something as sort of an homage, and that's really where that started.
How long did it take you to write it?
I wrote it in about, I don't know, you kind of have the idea and it's germinating, and the actual writing part of it is not that long, but I was kind of germinating the idea for a month or so, and then Sean and I shot it over one extremely long day in California.
Any improvisation involved in that at all?
No, you know, it's fun. It's a funny thing. I'm not a big fan of improvisation. I think that it's great for rehearsal, but, you know, improvisation really... unless you have Robin Williams, you know, rest his soul, or, you know, the thing is one actor is improvising one thing and the other actor is improvising the other thing, and they don't always meet. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's better to stick to the script. And I'm working on a sitcom now called Be Positive, which is on CBS, and it makes your day a lot shorter too when the actors aren't chiming in with ideas, and, you know, because like I said, most of the time, most actors, God love them, they kind of improvise about their own character. They don't improvise in a way that makes the story go forward. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a big fan.
Okay. Do you want to take some questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
All right, if you got a question, raise your hand. Right there and right there. And once again, before we get started, thanks for doing this.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, I haven't been back to Pittsburgh in a long time. I made a movie here with Peter Falk called Roommates many years ago, and I had such a great experience here, and you know, one of the great ballparks, and of course you guys have one of the great hockey teams, so you know, I'm looking forward. I'm going to try and sneak out there tomorrow night.
Great.
All right, question right here for you.
Yes, in Fire in the Sky, you played Travis Walton, who says that he was abducted by aliens for 5 days in the 1970s. Do you believe that really happened to him?
I don't really disbelieve it. I mean, it took place, the incident was reported in 1975, and I stayed out of the way of that whole did it happen, didn't happen, because of my experience on the movie Memphis Belle. Memphis Belle was based on a real-life crew in World War II of a bomber plane, and they were real guys, but in the script of Memphis Belle, they changed all their names and, you know, made them fictional characters like the navigator, the pilot, played by Matthew Modine, the ball turret guy, played by Sean Astin. And the real Memphis Belle guys were so excited to have the movie be told about them, except the navigator, the guy that I played, is very scared in the movie, and he's portrayed as something of a coward, although that's like a relative term when you're in war. But his family was extremely upset that this was going to be the legacy of, you know, Chuck Layton was the guy's name, and my character's name was Phil Lowenthal. So the movie people were like, well, it's a different name, but the family was like, no, they're going to say the navigator on the Memphis Belle was a coward. So I got kind of drawn into that whole controversy, and it was very uncomfortable. So when I was doing Fire in the Sky just a few years later, I said to the producers, I don't want to meet the guy because I don't want to be drawn into that controversy. I'd rather just believe in the script and play the character. So I subsequently met him after we were filming, And I didn't have any reason to disbelieve him. It's an incredible account, and it hasn't made his life any better. Yes, sir.
Okay. Got a question for you right here.
In The Cutting Edge, did you have to learn figure skating and hockey for that role? And if you did figure skating, what brand boot did you wear?
The answer is yes and yes. I believe it was Rydell. Could that be right? Is that the right answer? Okay. I remember my skates were CCM Tax. I wore those more often. And yes, we did it. Moira and I both had to learn to skate, and it was a really incredible, one-of-a-lifetime experience because we had 3 months advance time to train. Like I think the movie started in like April 1st, and we started skating right around Christmas time. And neither of us had ever skated. And Moira was from Long Island and still living there, and I was living in New York City. And MGM Studios rented out this rink called Sky Rink, which is real unusual. Oh, you know that one? It's on the 9th floor in Hell's Kitchen, and I don't think it's there anymore. But anyway, oh, it is? Oh, that's great. I'll have to go by there. I thought somebody had told me it was gone. I believed them. Yeah, of course. So anyway, we'd go there every day, and the movie really came together for me one day because there was a sign up in the rink that you couldn't have hockey skates on the ice during figure skating time, and vice versa. And so I said, well, MGM owns the rink. We make our own rules. And Moira was like, get those hockey skates off. And I was like, I never did because it was a great way to tweak her. And to me, that made the whole movie make sense. And we just had a great rehearsal period, and we really became very close friends. And Moira got to be a terrific figure skater in a very short period of time. But she broke her leg in the first week of filming, landing a jump. So she doesn't skate almost at all in the whole movie. And so I had to skate more than they thought I would, mostly with her stunt double, Sharon Cars, who was almost like a photocopy of Moira, everything except the face from directly in the front. And there's shots of Sharon where she's like spinning. It's like a close-up, and she's spinning, but she looks so much like Moira that when she's spinning it, you believe it's Moira.
Okay. Got a question right over here.
Before we get to that question, so you came out of theater into film. How did that happen?
Yeah, I was a baseball player in college. I got injured, and then I thought I transferred. I was at Tulane University. I transferred to New York University, and I thought I really didn't want to get on with my life. I didn't want to get a real job or anything. But my dad was a guidance counselor, and he was like, "You got to stay in college because if you drop out, you'll never finish." And I thought, but I don't really want to do any homework or anything, so I'll just go into acting because that's probably the easiest thing, and there'll be girls there. And that was my entire career strategy. And of course, not knowing how to act, I couldn't get a part in any plays at NYU. It's a very serious acting school. I did an audition they liked, and they let me in. And so I couldn't get these parts. So eventually I found this space at New York University, which was being reconstructed. It was an empty room, and I asked the dean if I could use it to put on a play with my buddies.
Wow.
And so we started doing that, and we'd invite people from, casting directors, and we slide invitations under their door. And about the second year of fifth play, we usually have about 3 people in the audience. We'd set up about 50 chairs, and a big crowd would be 5 people. And so one day we had like 6 people, and nobody knew who the 6th guy was. It turned out he was a casting director, and he told an agent about me, and so that's how I got my start.
That's awesome.
Got a question right here.
Hello, DB Sweeney. Great to have you with us.
Hello, thank you.
So the question I've always wanted to ask you is, what can you describe on your experience of working on the Disney projects Dinosaur and Brother Bear, and what was your fondest memory of playing as Aladar and Samuel E. Wright as Crone?
Well, I had a great time. That was my first experience with animated movies at all, and that went on for like 5 years. It was, at the time, it was the most expensive movie ever made. Disney admitted to spending, I think, $200 million when it came out in 2000, and the real total was, I think, closer to $300 million because they built a whole digital animating studio and kind of ran the cost of it through that movie. Early on in the movie, Crone was voiced by Kiefer Sutherland, but he got tired of it taking so long, so he dropped out. He's a good buddy of mine, so it was fun to do a few sessions with him, and I just had so much fun. You go to work, and it's always fun to go and pretend you're a different character, but when you get to go pretend that you're a dinosaur, there's nothing better. It's like being 6 years old, and I remember one day the director said to me after I did a line, he said, "Now remember, you weigh 3 tons." And it was kind of the craziest direction I ever got, but then I realized what he was saying is that, so if you weigh 3 tons, your throat probably weighs 300 pounds, so make your voice sound a little heavier. It was just kind of just fun to pretend. And Brother Bear was the same kind of thing. My role in Brother Bear was much bigger in the original story, and they cut it out. The character gets killed, and he kind of becomes like Obi-Wan Kenobi to the other characters, and he appears many times, but at the end of the day, they took that out and slammed in some Phil Collins songs, I think, changed the movie a little bit.
I have a quick follow-up question. You mentioned baseball early on. Then you ended up being Shoeless Joe Jackson in 8 Men Out. Coincidence, or was that something that...
No, not so much a coincidence. John Sayles, he's a very serious filmmaker, and he wanted the players in 8 Men Out to be as believable as possible, and that's why he went after Charlie Sheen, was a high school baseball player, and so I thought that was a great challenge to try and be the first movie to make baseball believable. We didn't realize at the time that Kevin Costner was doing such a great job on Bull Durham. They filmed at exactly the same time. Really? And so I had spent 3 months, 4 months learning how to hit left-handed because I was a right-handed hitter and an outfielder in college, and it's very difficult for everybody who's played baseball, to switch to the other side and have it be believable. So I'd really spent a lot of time on it. And they came to me to play the Tim Robbins part in Bull Durham, and I said, I can't quit on these guys. I've already put this time in, and so I think those 2 movies sort of reset the bar for baseball players, and Kevin Costner was so good in Bull Durham. I mean, it just reset people's expectations of baseball in the movies, I think.
Thanks. I always wondered about that connection there, especially when you first mentioned that. We have a question in the back.
Right back here.
Hi.
Hi, Mr. Sweeney. Thank you for coming to Pittsburgh.
Thank you. Good.
I have a question. What would you say is the most difficult scene you've ever filmed?
Well, there's certainly scenes in Fire in the Sky were extremely difficult because trying to simulate the weightlessness of the character. And so we spent about, I think, 6 weeks to make all of the movie except for the alien sequence. And we spent 5 weeks on that 12-minute sequence in the movie. So you can imagine the meticulous detail. And every day I was on wires to appear simulated. And they had such a genius idea because usually when you see people on wires, whether it's in hook or something, you can always tell that they have on a harness and the hooks are holding them up from the middle of their body. Even after the computer-generated aspect takes out the wire itself, you can kind of tell that they're hovering from the ceiling. So to get around that, what they did was they hung me upside down, and they turned the camera upside down, and they built the set upside down. So it sort of confounds the audience's sense of equilibrium, and it made the whole thing work. But for me, it meant that I had to sort of hold my body very awkwardly against this wire, and I developed very serious back pain for a couple of years. So, I mean, I was walking around with a limp for a while after that, but I believed in the movie so much, and I also thought, at that time they were trying to make Spider-Man, and I thought, well, James Cameron, who was going to be the director, he's going to hear that I'm good on the wires, and he's going to make me Spider-Man. That's how naive and stupid I was. But it kept me going every day.
Okay, and next question. Right over
Right here.
You mentioned Roommates, and that's one of my favorite movies. And what was it like working with Peter Falk and the whole experience?
Well, Peter Falk was my late mom's favorite actor, and I love Peter Falk too because he's in one of my favorite movies called Mikey and Nicky with John Cassavetes. Which when I saw it as a young actor, I was like, wow, that's as good as it gets as far as acting goes. And I first met him at a premiere for 8 Men Out. We were at a film festival together, and I was with my mom. And, I'd only been in like 3 movies, and that was Peter Falk, and I just went over and said hello, and I said, hey, listen, I don't know what the right protocol is or the etiquette, but I wonder if you might say hi to my mom. And it chokes me up a little bit, but he moved his chair over, and he spent 45 minutes with my mom. And then 4 years later, we got to make Roommates together, so I already idolized him as an actor, and I thought he was a brilliant performer, but an even better person. And we got to be golfing buddies, and I got to play many times with him out in California before he passed away, and so that was one of the great chapters of my career.
So as far as I'm sorry, I just have another question here. As far as the writing, do you prefer that than directing or the acting? What really is your current passion?
Well, acting is the best job in the business because, you get to, a lot of other people have to set it up for you. And you're kind of like the place kicker in the football team. All the other people do the hard work to get you down there, and then you just kick it. And, of course, you have to make the field goal as the actor. But, writing is the hardest part of it because you start with nothing. You start with a blank page, figuratively and literally, and it's really hard. I like directing, but it's such a long day. I mean, you got to be the first guy to get there and the last guy to leave, and you seem like you never have enough money or enough time. But I would love to direct again. I'm currently working on a couple TV shows that I've written that are in development. So I think the key to having a long career is that you have to sort of get behind creating your own material, and whether it's original or adapted. So I spent a lot of time on that lately.
And as far as like, do you find you do your own editing as well?
No, that's another one of those things I don't have as much patience for. And I also feel like with comedy, editing is hard because before you've got it in the proper form and the proper shape,
Right.
you kind of start to lose faith in the jokes. Like maybe they're not as good as you thought when you were doing them. So I think it's good to have an editor put another set of eyes on it, and then you kind of come in and tweak it. That's the way I like to do it. I know there are a lot of directors who like to caress every frame, but that's not my taste.
Got a
Question
question
back
for you
there.
right here.
I was wondering if you could tell us any funny stories from the cutting edge.
Yeah, sure. Any hockey fans? Guys know Chris Chelios? Anyway, he's a close friend of mine since the 1980s. My son is he's his godfather, and so when we were doing the movie in Toronto, filming it, I said I thought it would be funny if the guy, because he was a very dirty player. I mean, he would admit this to this day. I mean, he was very physical and very dirty. I thought, wouldn't it be fun if, for the hockey fans, if the guy that destroyed Doug Dorsey in the Olympics was Chris Chelios playing for the West German team. And he thought that was funny. The studio thought it was funny, and so he came down to the set in Toronto and put on his skates and was out there and thrilled the entire crew. Like everybody couldn't, even though it was Toronto, they couldn't believe they have this future Hall of Famer, playing shinny with them on the set of the movie. And so he waited like 5 hours, and then the crew, they called lunch, and he took off his skates and he went to lunch, and he was like, I'm not going back out there. I've never had skates on for more than 5 hours in my life. My feet are killing me. So he sort of had a new respect for how long the movie day is and what goes into it. But it was great to have him there, and there's some funny pictures. I should put it on the internet of like him and this is before Germany reunified in 1992, and this Chris Chelios in the West German hockey jersey is pretty funny.
So I got to ask, just an odd question. What is the difference between hockey skates and figure skating skates?
Well, their figure skates are way tighter. They're way narrower and way tighter. And like in the movie, it shows like that toe pick on the front of the skates is a killer. And when you play hockey, when you skate in hockey skates, you're kind of on the balls of your feet because you got to be ready for an impact. And figure skates, you kind of stand up on your heels because it's all about this line and elegance. And so, if you lean forward, you only lean forward in figure skating to jump. So if you lean forward to stride, you hit the ice because that toe pick grabs. So I found figure skating to be way harder, but it made me a much better skater much more quickly. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of players in the NHL who, because they have a figure skating background, Scott Niedermayer is one guy that comes to mind, his mom was a figure skating instructor, and other guys that were great skaters like Brett Hedican, they had a figure skating structure.
Questions over there and there. And while he's headed back to the questions, I'd like to jump back to 8 Men Out real quick. It seemed like a really great ensemble cast. Any humorous stories behind that? It just seemed like almost like there's a lot of maybe mischief behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, it was a very mischievous group. Charlie Sheen and I had just finished a movie previous to that called No Man's Land, which is about stolen Porsches, and it's a movie that a lot of people think was the inspiration or the outright basis for Fast and Furious, and I think there's some truth to that. So while doing that movie, Charlie and I became very good friends, and Charlie became an international superstar because during the filming, he went from being Martin Sheen's second son to Platoon, the star of Platoon. That all happened while we were filming, and so it was very interesting to watch that transformation of somebody go from, like basically an unknown to somebody on the cover of Time magazine. And so anyway, we became friends through all that, and he went off to shoot Wall Street, and I went off to learn hit left-handed for 8 Men Out. But I was living in New York City, and I went to visit the set of Wall Street, and over a beer one night, I said, John Sayles had asked me to recruit other Hollywood athletes who could, play baseball. And I said, Charlie, let's do a movie about the World Series. And I said, I'll be the left fielder, you'll be the center fielder. I didn't tell him that I was Shoeless Joe Jackson and he was Joe Blow. So he never read the script. He shows up in Indianapolis to film the movie, and I run into him in the bar, and at that time he always had on a baseball hat. I'm sorry about the mic, I should be better at it. But anyway, he always had a baseball hat on and a blazer, and he's sitting at the bar smoking a cigarette when that was still possible, and reading the script for the first time, and I walk in, and he goes, Dave, I'm on page 42. Where's my part? I don't even have a part. I said, keep reading. It's a good movie. You'll like it. And so to his credit, he didn't quit. He just hung in there. but I think it might have fueled some of his bad habits, all that free time.
Got a question for you right here.
How difficult was it to go into voicing Aang for the Legend of Katara when the Last Airbender had been so long, and he had to go from like a teenage voice to an older gentleman voice? So was that difficult, and how did it feel to work for Nickelodeon?
I had a great time on that one. I got to meet J.K. Simmons, who plays my son. He voices my son, so it was kind of funny to. He's like 15 years older than me, but he was playing my son, and I think animation is just pure fun because, like I said, with a dinosaur, it's like it's just fully pretending, and you can separate yourself from the character, and just if you have some kind of idea in your mind, you can make it come to life. So I hope they bring that back. I mean, there's a whole part of young Aang's life that's never been told, and if the people call on that one, I'll be there in a minute.
Another question right here.
Hi, Mr. Sweeney. What was your experience in flying or riding in the B-17?
When we made Memphis Belle is one of the last movies of its kind because visual effects were not a really viable thing in 1990. So we made that movie in England, and they assembled 6 flying B-17 bombers that were fully functional, and we had 13 German fighter planes fully functional and 2 camera planes. So this is the last of the great air battle movies that'll ever be filmed, because now that would all be computer generated and done on blue screen. And so when we got there, we were permitted to fly on these planes because they needed to have extras that you could see in the windows of the planes, because digitally putting bodies in the right areas of the plane was prohibitively expensive. So they encouraged us to ride along on the planes until one day one of the planes crashed on takeoff, and everybody got out of the plane, but the plane was completely burned up. And that was when I sort of knew it intellectually, but it became very clear to me how dangerous that job was. The lightest metal that they could come up with in the 1930s when we were building all these bomber planes was magnesium, and magnesium is almost as flammable as paper. So the entire plane was consumed by flames in less than 10 minutes. And that plane was owned by the French government, and the rumor always was that the French were tired of paying the maintenance on it, so they ordered the pilots to crash it. None of the pilots pretended they didn't speak French well enough to understand the question.
Got time for about 2 more questions.
All right, we got one right here for you.
Yeah, just were there any funny stories or anything from working on Spawn? Because I know it's kind of a crazier movie too.
Yeah, I loved working on Spawn. It was kind of funny when Terry Fitzgerald, Todd McFarlane, the guy who wrote it, his best friend in real life is Terry Fitzgerald, the guy that I played. And he wrote Spawn as an African American, and then Terry Fitzgerald was white. And then later on, he had this revisionist idea that he was going to tell everybody, well, they forced D.B. Sweeney on me. And the day I met him, he was like, thank you so much for doing my movie. I'm so glad you're here and everything. So it was just funny to watch that story evolve. But the guy who directed it, Mark DePay, is a genius guy. He and Steve Spaz Williams were the 2 guys who developed the technology for James Cameron in The Abyss, where the water finger and that technology of creating that illusion, which became the liquid Terminator effect in T2. So these were 2 of the pioneering visual effects guys in the history of Hollywood, and they eventually got kicked out of the George Lucas world because George Lucas has this sprawling visual effects ranch up in Marin County in California, and if these guys were top guys, in charge of 200 or 300 visual effects people, and there was one building that was George Lucas's private sanctuary that you were not allowed to go in, and not only did they go in there, but they drank all his 400-year-old whiskey. So they got kicked out of, they were kicked off the ranch, so they started their own company called Banned from the Ranch. It was called Skywalker Ranch, George Lucas's thing. So anyway, James Cameron, who was so powerful in the business, was like, I'm not making movies without these guys. So they went on to work on Titanic and Avatar. But anyway, so Mark, this is one of the only movies that Mark had directed. And I just thought he was such an interesting guy that he was going to, really have a chance to do what he wanted. But there was a lot of friction on that set, and they didn't really. He's kind of a mild-mannered guy, and I think you have to be a little bit of a bull sometimes with the studios, and that wasn't really his personality. So I was really happy to work with Martin Sheen for the 3rd time, and to be around all those people. John Leguizamo was terrific in that movie, and it was really fun.
Great. We've got time for a question more. You're headed to your table to sign after this?
Yeah, I'll be out there today and tomorrow.
Great. And then there's going to be a photo op, I believe, later today, too. Let's grab one more question. Right there. And welcome back to Pittsburgh while we...
So I really am glad to be here. I was so surprised by this city when I first came here. Because, growing up in Long Island, you watch movies and TV, you're like, oh, it's going to be all coal mines and factories and smokestacks. And it's one of the more beautiful cities, I think, in America.
Thank you.
So the last question I had is, of all your experience on working on the many films throughout your career, what would you say are the challenges and the fun parts of working on both live action and animation?
Well, I think animation is very technical in terms of the way you deliver your lines. Like especially with Dinosaur, they started out recording me on video saying these lines, and then they gave it to the computer animators, and they created the characters. And now I went back in, and I would have to ADR, do my lines again to the movements of the dinosaur's mouth. So it's kind of interesting the way it went back and forth, and it's very subtle. When the animation, especially of animals, where if you're playing people that are sort of animated people, I think the audience is a little more forgiving in their mind. Did that line really sync up with the way their mouth was moving? But if you're trying to create the illusion of an animal talking, it has to really be precise, and it's it's hard to put your finger on which sound worked on which line, but it's like trial and error, and you play it over and over again. So I really enjoyed that as a technical challenge, and I think people who are musicians, which I'm not, have an especially good time with that. But the hardest thing in Hollywood is getting parts. I mean, it's so competitive, and especially if you're not like an insider. Like I mentioned before, I'm from a little town in Long Island, and I kind of stumbled into it, and I don't really have a network of I didn't have a network of connections starting out where here's the people you should be nice to, and here's the people you should kiss up to, and I was basically like, what time is the baseball game I get free tickets to?
Well, once again, thank you for being here. Thank you, guys.
So much. Thank you. Great job. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thank
It's
you.
wonderful to have you here. Give it up, D.B. Sweeney.
Thank you all.
Hi, this is Michael Shanks, and you're watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. The fate of the universe may depend on it. And have fun and follow your fandom.